Hello, my name is Zoe, and today I will be talking about the Stanford prison experiment. Just to begin, I will go over a quick overview of what this presentation will be covering. I will be going over when and where this took place, who conducted the experiment, who participated in it, how the experiment was run, what happened throughout the experiment, what the purpose of it was, and why and how it could be applied to you and why it's important. So to begin, in August of 1971, at Stanford University, a group of researchers conducted this infamous study, and it has since gained a lot of attention, both good and bad, from the public around the world, as well as the American Psychological Association. So most of the bad attention has been very critical due to the ethical reasons of this study. Many violations were made on the physical and psychological effects on the participants. Policies today would not allow for an experiment like this to be conducted. Back in the 1970s, policies and regulations were very minimal and not strict. So back then this did seem a bit more acceptable, but today it would not. So this man, Philip Zimbardo, was the creator and mastermind of what we know today as the Stanford prison experiment. He even himself became very influenced by what was going on and his observations, and he developed, just like the guards and the prisoners, the participants in this experiment, developed roles. He also developed and internalized this role of the warden. So we could see even him, who was completely outside and not participating in the study, was also very heavily influenced. In the end, he was the one who made the final decision to terminate the experiment, and I will explain why in just a few slides. So to obtain participants, an ad was put in the paper to get this study out there and to get some people to apply. As you can see, $15 a day was offered, and in the 1970s, $15 a day was a lot. So over 70 men applied to be participants, yet only 24 were chosen. Before they were chosen, they had to go through diagnostic interviews as well as personality tests to ensure that the participants were both physically and psychologically healthy. Now, this is also an ethical procedure where they had to make sure that their participants weren't already dealing with a psychological or physiological disability. Participants, once they were selected, they were split into groups. Half of them were assigned the roles of a prisoner, and half of them were assigned the roles of guards. So a mock prison was created for the simulation. The basement of the psychology department at the university was remodeled, and cells were installed for the prisoners, and the hallway became known as the yard for walking and talking, and I also believe meals. So you can see in this image that they didn't have a lot of space to work with, and the hallway is very narrow, but they did this to give it the realistic feel, and also to enhance that realistic feel. The prisoners were fake arrested the day, the start date of the simulation, and the officers that were, I guess, volunteering brought them to the psychology department. So the experiment only lasted 7 days. Conditions and treatment became so extreme that the experiment had to be terminated abruptly. Just to give you an idea, on day 1 was when the verbal abuse began. It was verbal, but it was still abuse. And it began with the guards, saying things, calling names to the prisoners. And then day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, the abuse and the violence continued. The guards began to not only verbally abuse them, but also physically abuse the prisoners. They demanded them to do extreme physical activities that were completely unnecessary. They just degraded them. They were so emotionally abusive that some of the prisoners became so helpless and depressed, and a few had to be released early because their mental state was just completely deteriorating before them. And some of them, I believe it was one of them, had a mental breakdown. So you can see a lot of the abuse really had a horrible impact on these prisoners. On day 6, Zimbardo announces that the experiment is over. All were free to go home, and obviously the prisoners were very relieved about this. Many said they just couldn't take it anymore. As you can see just in the images, the treatment is just unnecessary, or was unnecessary. And on day 7 at 5 p.m., the Stanford County Jail was officially closed. So you may be asking why an experiment so dangerous could have been conducted, and why would someone want to see this happen? Well, the aim of the study was to observe how individuals conform to their environments and roles. This goes along with the role theory, in which members of a community take on behaviors that would be expected to come along with a particular role that they either take on or that they are given. We see this happening in this experiment. We see the guards take on authoritarian and aggressive behaviors because that is how they expected them to behave, or that's how they thought they were expected to behave. And prisoners became submissive, they became depressed, and they became helpless and hopeless that, no matter what they did, they would just be treated poorly, and that led to them, becoming very depressed, anxious, and it really got to them psychologically. So, what are the implications of the study? How does this apply to me? Well, first ask yourself, how do you conform? How does this apply to you? Well, we all have roles, therefore we all conform to those roles, whether we're with our families, whether we're in the work field, or with our friends, we all conform. If we're with our families, we tend to behave a little better, tend to do things that are expected from us. Again, same thing in the workplace. We do what our coworkers and our employers expect us to do, and we go along with what our friends also expect from us. This raises the question, if we are put into certain environments, would we let ourselves, just develop those roles, those behaviors that we think are expected from us because we want to conform and we want to fit in? Or, in a situation where, someone has to stand up, or someone, needs to put a foot down and say, this isn't right, or I don't agree, do you stick to your true self, or do you, again, just go along with, the rest of the crowd and what is expected, or what you think is expected from you? So, again, this is something we can all, no matter what you are involved in, you conform in every way. Just in a classroom, you conform to a specific role known as a student. We're all familiar with that. And at work, in our work environments, we also take on certain behaviors that we wouldn't normally take on, with our friends. So again, this experiment had a lot of, broader implications, and they are very applicable to every single one of us. Thank you.